I guess what I'm saying is like our experiences are so insanely complicated, like the way we perceive everything, the way that we're aware that we perceive everything, that I'm aware I'm talking to you, a human being with all these complex personality traits that I've gotten to know over the past 5 or so years, all these memories that interact with me and stuff like that. The way we feel inspired by things that ties into consciousness. All of those things tie into consciousness.
Hello, everyone. This is Out of the Box Podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm here with my host, or with my co-host, still Adcock. My name is Jose Tapia. We are here in this new episode where we will be talking about consciousness. Dun, dun, dun. So, the reason we want to talk about this topic is because Steele actually, part of the book that he's writing, um that he will kind of mention in a bit, talks about the aspect of consciousness. And it's one of the things that right now in our modern scientists are still investigating what that means, what that is. And so we want to kind of dabble a little bit into it and see maybe what things you catch as well that you think are really interesting. So um without further ado, we'll get started. But before we do, if you like this topic, please leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, and also give it a thumbs up to let us know if you do enjoy this video. But we'll get started now. So, still let us know a
So,
little bit about your book.
okay, yeah, let me just briefly go over that because we talked about in our number 2 podcast, "Is God Real?" And we were talking about this book that I've been writing for the past well, damn, it's probably been over 5 years by now. But yeah, I've been on leave from the book, for lack of a better term, because of grad school has been having me so busy. It's insane, but in a good way, and definitely in a good way. But I haven't been able to work on the book for a few years. But long story short, the book's about God and about trying to find, for lack of a better term, evidence of his existence, or things that suggest that he exists, and while also counter arguing against arguments against his existence, I guess you could say. But looking into one thing in particular, consciousness, human consciousness. What the hell is human consciousness? Like philosophers, scientists, neurologists, biologists, every almost intellectual on the planet has tried to debate and figure out what consciousness even is. I mean, when I first started this whole research endeavor on this book, it started with consciousness. That's where it all really started, because I think I mentioned in that podcast too, my renewed faith in God as a Catholic and Christian, it came from reading this book about near-death experiences. And I'm fully aware of all the counter arguments against near-death experiences. That's the topic for a whole other podcast. I can't get into it right now. But basically, I came to the realization that if you can prove that consciousness is something that can exist after death, then surely you can support the existence of God in some way. Now, I realize that's an oversimplification. Like, I can't get into all of that complicated relationship stuff right now because we're focused on consciousness. So I think it'd be good just to start off. And the reason I mention all that is because I started out researching what the hell consciousness is, and I tried to find definitions of it, and I found dozens upon dozens of definitions. So, what do you think consciousness is, Jose? Like off the top of your head, what do you think it is?
I think consciousness is, in a way, it's an overarching um, form or energy that a lot of people have over the ages considered as God, something that is really alive, constantly living and moving, which explains why it could be an energy. But I think it's something that really connects us through it all. uh, and some might call it the Holy Spirit in more religious terms. But I think it's something that is definitely alive, connecting us, informing us, sending information, thoughts, from one person to the other, and really keeping the ecosystem of ecosystem of everything just working as it should be in its natural sense.
Yeah, so you've kind of taken upon a kind of a more, I guess, cultural definition of consciousness in the sense of religious kind of history of religion, different cultures kind of defining consciousness as this energy, like you were saying. And then from a religious standpoint, possibly God, possibly this human spirit. And I myself, as a Catholic, kind of think of consciousness as the human spirit. From another from I guess from a philosophical standpoint, some people argue, like I guess neurologists, certainly not all of them, but a fair amount, argue that consciousness is possibly an illusion of the mind, an illusion of this biological organ of our brain, that it's not actually a real thing. It's just neurons firing in certain ways for whatever reason make us think that we're aware of ourselves and make us think that we have free will and make us think that we control our actions. Now, I'm aware of certain experiments. There's an experiment done with this box. You have to press a button, and they found out there was like a millisecond. I can't remember the exact number delay between us being aware of making the decision to press the button. Now, that's a whole other complicated thing. But just kind of getting down to it, my argument on the argument that consciousness is an illusion of our physical brain, saying that it doesn't really exist. My counter argument to that is it would seem illogical to state that consciousness does not exist because every person claims that they're aware of themselves, right? Everyone claims that they're aware of themselves. I'm aware of you right now.
Self-awareness.
I'm aware that my parents are downstairs. I'm aware that there's people around me driving around in the city probably right now. I'm aware that there's people on the other side of the world. But so I've heard consciousness defined as awareness. I've heard it defined as being awake, being conscious of yourself and other people, you know? So I think that's interesting. But there's a lot of problems with consciousness because there's different levels of it. Like someone who's in a coma, someone who's dreaming, someone who has a mental illness. It changes consciousness. So what is that? You know, it's weird.
Yeah, their experience of consciousness is like you said, maybe a different level of consciousness.
Yeah, it makes it complicated.
And so the consciousness that every human being has depends on their natural state, or like their, if somebody has a disability, does that mean they have less consciousness? Or
right, exactly. You're tapping into something very.
What would you say?
Yes, you're tapping into what I was actually going to go into next, actually, because that kind of creates a problem, right? Because if mental illness is, if you're going to consider that into the model of consciousness that we're talking about right now, but what does that mean? Like someone with schizophrenia, for example, psychosis, who hallucinates voices in their head or hallucinates a person or a monster right there that's not really there. What does that mean for consciousness? That means they're consciously perceiving something there, a hallucination that you do not perceive because you're not the one with schizophrenia. You don't see what they're seeing. So how is that possible? You know, like, and now I guess that would fall maybe into the people who believe that consciousness is an illusion by the brain because the brain is creating the hallucination. And if that person is consciously aware of the hallucination, but you're not consciously aware of it, then that must mean consciousness isn't this objective thing, I guess. But is that what that really means? Or does it mean that we just, there's, like you said earlier, different levels of consciousness, like when you're sleeping, when you're in a coma, when you have schizophrenia, you know, it's weird, right?
Yeah, there's different levels of being aware of reality. I guess,
Yeah.
our awareness is what we perceive to be real, right? And so I think that's why magic fascinates us so much, because it takes us outside of what we normally consider normal. And so it expands our consciousness. And I think that's what it is. To expand consciousness is to expand awareness of the possibilities within the realm that you exist, right? And so, the fact that people can't fly, but in your dreams they can, right? That means that, it's acceptable to create that within your conscious state of dreaming, but in your conscious state of living in reality, that's not a possibility, right? And so I think that technology, and as things improve and things change, it continues to expand what is within the dream world into the reality of what we have in the present moment. And
Right.
so I think, and I think we I don't want to get into another topic of dreams, but
Yeah.
I think sometimes dreams portray to our consciousness the possibilities that are possible in our awake consciousness.
Yeah. They take things from our waking lives, like memories and stuff like that, and it replays when we're asleep. And our brain is consciously aware of the dreams that we're having when we're asleep, just like we're consciously aware of things right now.
It's almost like
Yeah.
meditating. A lot of
Yeah.
people say that
Meditation.
their best ideas come from meditation, just because
Yeah. They
they're in
tune
the
out.
calm state of possibility. They calm all their thoughts. They calm where they are, and they can think. And some people, I think it's Tom Bilyeu. He has a podcast called um, Impact Theory, and he brings in renowned people that done really amazing things. And one of the things that he does, it's he does what's called thinkitating, right? It's instead of meditating, he's thinking through thoughts and stuff like that to solve problems in his
Oh yeah.
waking life. you know and sometimes the solutions come in those moments, which is really crazy. He says almost 80% of his ideas and solutions come in those moments of meditation. And so you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
just imagine how crazy this powerful thing of consciousness is within
Yeah.
the internal state, when you do close into
Right.
yourself, that you can bring out into the world, into the real world. So I
Yeah.
think that's a really fascinating
Yeah. Meditation
aspect.
is yeah. Meditation is a whole other level of consciousness that, for whatever reason, opens up these doors to other thoughts that we wouldn't normally think of if we weren't in a meditative state, like that person you talked about is doing.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
And
fascinating. Yeah, because different
yeah, and
levels bring different things.
makes me think, like also in the religious aspect, various traditions have always had the practice, of having, like you said, meditative states, whether that be through
Yeah,
prayer or through meditation. So it's always been a human practice to do this. And so it's very primitive, in the sense that, it's been carried out by several generations. And now we're really discovering the true aspects of it, to the point where we can actually alter it to benefit what we naturally do ourselves, right? So we can really hack the system in a way, and I think that that's eventually, what we're doing nowadays. We're expanding the consciousness, the possibility of consciousness, just because we found so much information about it. And there's still a lot that we don't know. And I think
yeah,
sometimes through previous generations, we learn more from the ancient, why they did that, and we start discovering, like, oh wow, there's a lot of connections between, healing, or thinking clearer, feeling emotionally stable from praying, or from meditating, and so there is this aspect where it connects. And I have this, one of the really interesting things that I was reading recently was, they did a study of these people, right? And they wanted to see the power of prayer, right? And so they gave them a list of people, right? A list of people, and they had just the control group, and the group that was going to pray, right? And so the first group was going to pray for the same lit for a different list of patients in the hospital, but they were not going to use their emotions. They were just going to go through the motions, basically, of like doing a prayer or whatever. The other group, they really activated their emotional heart. They put themselves in a state of gratitude. And when they started praying over these people, you know uh what the researchers found, which was really crazy, these patients were not from that year. They were from years before, right?
Right.
And so they went back into the records to see, you know, to see if those patients have, and it happened to be that the patients that they prayed for with emotion actually got better. But it transcended time backwards. You know, the
That's
prayers
weird.
that
Wow.
they did went back in time. And so I think that, you know, our actions and our thoughts, you know, that's why I think a lot of cultures say, you know, your ancestors are still with you. You know, you walk amongst your ancestors. You know, I think that that has a powerful aspect because we're connected to the consciousness that lived, right? All the people and the ideas that lived before are still accessible to ourselves, right? They still live among us. And I think that's one of the crazy things that, you know, I think a lot of people, you know, might just say like, hey, they die and they're not here anymore. But I think there's still reminiscences. Is that the word? Reminiscences
Yeah.
of people's consciousness still alive in the world, right? And I think
That's
that's so
interesting what
interesting.
you're saying. Yeah, maybe that's what spirits are, you know? Like I don't know. Like there's a lot about that too. And like if well, hypothetically if consciousness for whatever reason did continue on after death and lingered on, I don't know. Is that what a spirit is? Is that what these spirits people claim to see are that we've seen on our experiences in San Antonio? I mean, yeah, you know, but yeah, it really makes you wonder. It makes you think, and I'm kind of like at that point of being open minded about it. Even though I've studied psychology hardcore, and I've taken classes in biology, I've taken biological psychology where it was all just about the brain. I understand the monist point of view that the brain is all there is, and that consciousness is just an illusion. Like I get where they're coming from, you know, because I get where they're coming from in a sense that we really don't have a whole lot of evidence or experiments
It's
to
not
back
something you
up.
can grasp,
It's
right?
not, it's hard to measure. Like, how do you measure
Yeah.
consciousness, right? And I understand that point of view, but I also am open minded in a sense to where I'm open to the possibility, the philosophical arguments that consciousness is not, you can't just reduce consciousness down to this physical brain. It's not that simple because consciousness is so complicated. I mean, just look at our own experiences, the way we experience colors, the way I'm experiencing the color of your shirt being red right now. Now, surely someone would argue that a colorblind person might see your shirt as a different color right now, and I see it as
Hmm.
red. And
Yeah.
that's an argument against what I'm saying right now. But I guess what I'm saying is like our experiences are so insanely complicated, like the way we perceive everything, the way that we're aware that we perceive everything, that I'm aware I'm talking to you, a human being with all these complex personality traits that I've gotten to know over the past 5 or so years, all these memories that interact with me and stuff like that. The way we feel inspired by things that ties into consciousness. All of those things tie into consciousness. Consciousness is like the accumulation of all of these things that we are constantly aware of, this stream of consciousness that gives us the illusion of linear time. And I just feel
And
like it's too
yeah.
simple to reduce it down to a physical thing, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what a lot of people also reduce it down to is the fact that it's just, you know, yeah, you feel like your ancestors are with you because they gave you their genes. And so it's all an evolution thing, right? It's just habits and traits that have been passed down from generation to generation to form you, right? And so that's why you feel a certain connection to the world because eventually, you know, everybody started coming from something, right? And you know, as people evolved and grew, you know, they passed on traits. And I think sometimes people, you know, think about that, but I think one of the fascinating things is that cultures around the world, even before the internet, were doing almost similar things, building pyramids, building, you know, structures of and systems to organize stuff, you know. And I think, you know, the fact that people around the world were creating the same things, almost replicating, you know, what the other people in other parts of the world were doing really adds to the fact that, there had to been some form of consciousness living amongst them where they could connect thoughts from what, almost like receptors, like receiving information from other parts of the world to understand how to come up with stuff, or how to organize, how to think of things. And so that's why I think it's, you know I think we can all tap into the fullness of knowledge. And I think, in a way, that is what consciousness is where everything lives, where all existence. And I think we can even talk about a little bit of string theory. A lot of people have talked about that idea that, all the possibilities exist within, the realm of consciousness, you can say, or existence. But it only takes, something to alter it to become true. And how I can explain it, it's almost like an atom, right? And so inside an atom, we have the neurons. I think those are the ones running around the nucleus, right?
Oh, right, the
Or
electrons.
proton.
Yeah.
The electrons. Yeah, the
Yeah, the
electrons.
electrons are in the center, and then like, oh no, yeah, the
No,
electron
the
electron
electrons are the
cloud.
ones running.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
electron
so
cloud.
what's interesting is that you can never know, where an electron is going to appear, but you can only measure it at an exact moment in time. So it's only when you focus onto a thought, when you focus into trying to find an electron, that you find it, and you're like, oh, it's right there in this measurement and stuff like that. But you can't
Yeah,
measure where it's going to go, where it's going to be.
yeah, the
And
double
so
slit
it's similar
experiment.
to our thoughts, right? It's similar to our thoughts. When we focus on a thought, that thought becomes a reality, right? And or it becomes a possibility. And so that's why I think it's so interesting that we can dream of things in our future, in our career, in our life, in our goals.
Yeah,
Because when you focus on something, the possibilities of it becoming true, are very likely. You can just picture it in your mind. And I think that's why some people have gotten really close to the idea of the secret and stuff like that. I think people have taken it, maybe over exaggerated a little bit, in the sense that, you think it'll become it, right? But I think there's also an action aspect of it, discipline that comes with it, hard work that comes with it. But it is part of mindset, right? Part of succeeding in life does come down to mindset and believing in what hasn't become, right? And so it's being able to be persistent and have patience to believe in something that is not yet existing, right? And so
yeah,
I think that that's something really fascinating about our consciousness, our ability to imagine and create, that allows us to continue to expand the possibilities of what consciousness, or what our reality can be.
yeah, definitely. My final thoughts on that is I agree with you. The imagination and the ability to project ideas of what we want to do in the future is a whole other complicated thing about consciousness that I also find difficult to reduce down to simple one physical organ of the brain. Now, I realize it can be broken down into this thought, that thought, tied to this neuron, that neuron. That I can't get too detailed into that right now for the sake of time, but maybe in a later podcast, because you're also tapping into, we could talk about quantum consciousness, a theory by Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist, believe at the University of Arizona, who is working on this theory of tying quantum physics, what you were talking about, the double slit experiment, to where an electron can be in two different places almost at the same time, but you won't really know where it is until you measure it, until our
Mhm.
man-made measurement devices find it. We won't really know where it is. In some sense, in terms of in terms of the electron being probabilistic, not known, I guess, in that sense. And
Yeah.
yeah, you're kind of tapping into quantum consciousness, like the idea of our thoughts working in that same way as the double slit experiment. Maybe that's what consciousness is. And dude, that'd be we could really dive into that one.
That'd be an interesting
Yeah,
topic.
yeah,
All right, we'll cut it off there. Leave a nice cliffhanger. So thank you everyone for listening in today. We're really excited to talk about this topic, something we've been thinking about for some time. And if you like to know more about this topic, please leave a like, subscribe to our channel, leave a comment to hear about what you thought about this topic. And until next time, stay golden.
And,
Venice.
and